Means it's time for one of our afternoon STEM shows here at the Headwaters Science Center. My name is Ryan. I'm one of the educators here. And much like we are typically doing on Friday, I'm going to be doing a follow-up show here to Lee's show on Wednesday. So every Wednesday, Lee reads a book from the Beltrami Public Library. And typically on Friday, I follow up with it, doing a little bit more of a deep dive on kind of one of the concepts that was featured in the books. And so on Wednesday, we read a book called The Ugly Five, that was talking about these five animals that, were sort of, for lack of a better term, ugly. And that was kind of how they were defining themselves as being these animals that, maybe were physically ugly. Some of them, had lifestyles that would probably register as being kind of gross and unpleasant. Like we have the bird that eats the garbage and the hyena that's eating the bones and stuff like that. Stuff that doesn't necessarily register as being a very, pleasant or glamorous lifestyle for us. And then, of course, at the very end, these animals who are marching around kind of, I don't know if I would say gloomily, but certainly not, really relishing the fact that they're kind of ugly as they're walking around. And they come to the woods at the end, and out pops a bunch of baby versions of those animals, and we look at those and say, oh, what a bunch of cute critters that are these baby versions of these animals. And the babies, of course, speak of their appreciation for their parents, even though their parents are maybe kind of ugly, they love them anyway, type of thing. And I thought that was kind of interesting for a couple reasons. One, there's just sort of a general talk about aesthetics here, what do we mean when we say ugly? The other thing that's kind of interesting is that, we're looking at, a wildebeest here that we're supposed to read as being an ugly wildebeest. But then when we look at the baby wildebeest, we're supposed to say, oh, what a cute animal. So what happens there? What's different between the baby wildebeest and the adult wildebeest that makes that transition happen where it goes from a thing where as humans we register it as being a cute thing versus being an ugly thing? So that's going to be the main gist of it today. And so I have a few things in front of me that we're going to chat a little bit about. And I guess first and foremost, one of the things that's really important is recognizing sort of what makes a thing cute. What are some trends that we see in things that are cute? When I say picture a cute animal, there's going to be some things that are pretty typical of it. We tend to picture things that are furry. We tend to picture things that are kind of rounded in a lot of ways. We tend to picture things that have big eyes is a big trend of things that we kind of register as cute, big round eyes in particular. Body proportions, it tends to be things that have kind of stubby limbs we tend to register as cute, things that have relatively big heads relative to their body we tend to register as cute. And the assumed biology behind that is that those are all features that we see in human babies. And so the assumption is that we look for traits that we can sort of ascribe that would be true of human babies, and we tend to ascribe them to other things, and it kind of evokes a similar response for those things that we see in human babies. And so, again, the question there is, why do so many baby versions of animals share these similar traits? Why is this a thing? And the big thing, particularly for human babies, and I guess particularly for mammals, so all the things I'm describing are particularly true for the baby versions of mammals. And the big sort of unifying thing for mammals, the thing that really makes a lot of that sort of skull features, the relatively big eyes for the head, the big round head type of thing, is kind of a universal, relatively bigger when you're a baby versus when you're young. And the reason for that is basically a limitation of birth canals. So mammals, when we're born, we have big heads. We have basically as big of a head as we can manage to pass through a birth canal. And so what ends up happening is you get this head that develops early and gets to a certain size and has to, like I said, pass through a birth canal. And then as we mature, after we come out of our mother, our body proportions change a little bit. And so we have this thing where we have, these really relatively big heads, and particularly these really big round heads and round eyes relative to our body size, that is very standard across a lot of mammals. And like I said, it's true of humans, it's true of, like I said, most mammals. And so what I have here are two deer skulls. And so this one that I'm holding in my left hand would be camera right for you guys, is an adult white-tailed deer. And the one I have here in my other hand is a like newborn, a very young white-tailed deer. You can tell how young it is by looking at the top. There's even still a hole in the skull there where the plates in the skull haven't fully fused together. This is a like infant deer here. And you can immediately see like how much bigger, how much more like rounded and domed the top of the head is here, how much rounder it is. Like I said, and that roundness is something that is true in human infants too. I don't have human skulls to compare for this, but I'll tell you, it holds pretty true for human skulls too. The relative roundness and just like size of the head, the cranial area relative to the rest of the skull. The other thing you'll see is it's kind of shorter. Like the face is shorter. It's a rounder overall head because the face isn't exhibiting as much, good vocab word, I just used it in another video not too long ago, much less prognathic face in our baby deer than what we have in our adult deer. So when I say prognathic, what I mean is how far the like nose and mouth bits are projecting out from the rest of the skull. It tends to be a lot smaller in baby animals, which contributes to this roundness that, like I said, we tend to associate as being very cute. And so this is something that we see very true, like I said, in baby mammals kind of across the board. We tend to describe mammalian traits as being cute much more than we do like fish and reptile traits. You know, you don't often see a fish that you look at and go, oh, what a cute fish. Or what a cute lizard, what a cute snake. You know, we don't get that all that often. At least not nearly as much as we see a cute puppy or a cute kitty or a cute bunny or whatever. And so, again, the question is, like, why is it like that? Like I said, there's a limit to the birth canal there that particularly affects mammals that does not come into effect when you're a snake. Like, you don't have the same issue of needing to pass this thing directly through a birth canal because you're laying an egg instead. And so the body proportions tend to be more similar in baby snakes than they are in baby mammals, for example. But we do see some other animals that sort of exhibit very sort of infantilizing traits. We'll call it traits that are more similar of babies than they are of sort of the adult versions of what those animals would typically exhibit. It's a thing that we see a lot actually in domestic animals. And so I brought up Orion here. Probably thought he was going to get off this week without having to be in a show because he wasn't in the Wednesday reading, but I got him. And so we can look at Orion, and Orion is a great example of a rabbit who has been very much bred for appearances. He does not really look like a wild bunny would look because his breeding has been dictated by humans, and it's been dictated by humans largely to the benefit of like being sold as a pet, basically. And so what ends up happening there, he ends up being bred for traits that we would typically associate as being cute. And so, again, we're seeing very similar traits to what we would see in like a baby animal, like a baby bunny or our baby deer relative to our adult deer. We have a much shorter face, so wild rabbits have a more prognathic face than what Orion would have, so shorter face leads to a rounder looking head. Relatively large eyes, and he's not even as much. If you come and visit and see Summer and Theo, our new bunnies, they have gigantic eyes for the size of their head, and that's something that, again, they've somewhat been bred for the sake of appearances. Color patterns, white tends to be a color that we tend to associate with being cute as humans. We like white, and so you'll see domestic animals end up oftentimes suddenly getting white patches on them because a lot of the stuff that we breed for when we're domesticating will have this side effect of other things that end up, you know, being cute as well. It's kind of a weird genetic quirk, let's call it. Yeah, like I said, we're seeing Orion here, and like I said, just talking about like the traits that he has, like the floppy ears, would be something that, again, registered to us as being cute more so than like practical for him surviving in the wild, because again, it kind of contributes to the roundness. We don't like edges on our cute things. We don't like a thing that looks sharp or pointy in any way. And so, like I said, even with the rabbits, you see something like the ears end up getting floppy and kind of brought down so that they don't project out as much. And we, like I said, we associate that with being cute. And this is something that even holds true for stuff that, like, isn't an animal. I mean, you'll see people who, you know, if you look at, like, like a Volkswagen Beetle. People will say a Volkswagen Beetle is cute, like as a car, or like a Mini Cooper. They're cute, people will say. And what traits do they exhibit? Boy, do those round headlights look a lot like eyes. Boy, does that big domed top look like a big old baby head on top of it. You know, you buy your Volkswagen Beetle, you're kind of driving around it's like the infantilized version of a regular car. And like I said, the result is that we tend to associate those cars as being cute and brand them that way and sell them to people that we, you know, associate, that we that want to buy something that is cute rather than like tough looking. I mean, here's a quick example. I'll use the blackboard here, because we as humans, like, part of being as social as we are is we are we're very built for recognizing faces in other things. Like, finding a human face is something that our brain and our vision is really tuned to. And so as the result is that we're able to, well, I don't know if able to, we are compelled to, I guess, like, find human faces in anything. Anywhere we can find a human face, we'll find a human face, basically. And so, like, that's why I can come over here and I can draw, you know, here's two eyes, well, here's two dots, and a curved line. And I'm sure you look at that and you say, oh yeah, that's a face, right? I mean, does that really look like me? Like, when we put them side by side, is that a human face? I mean, we look at it and we say, yeah, because we're kind of programmed to see human faces and things. Why is it not this guy's face? He's got two eyes and kind of a frowny mouth, but we don't see that and go, oh yeah, it looks like a fisher. We say, that looks like a person. Because we as humans are programmed to do that, and it's a thing we do to animals as well, and that's part of what results in this cute response, is we look at a deer and we see the eyes, we see the mouth, we see the you know, facial features moving around, and we see something human in that. We're able to empathize with it because we look at it, and some part deep in our brain is like, oh, this thing's like a person. And this is something we see all the time, even just on the exhibit floor at the Headwater Science Center, where somebody will, like, personify the animals in certain ways that, you know, probably aren't necessarily true. It's a talk I always have with, like, new volunteers and new staff when they come in, when I'm training them as far as, like, going out on the floor, is, you know, there's always going to be this temptation to try and ascribe human emotions, human feelings, human sensibilities to the animals, because you're going to, really easy for us to, you know, look in the owl's eyes and recognize, or perceive, I guess, not necessarily recognize, but perceive, like, a human intelligence in there, because, I said, it's got a face that's oriented a whole lot like our face is. I said, but it's kind of a trap that our brain lays for us. And like I said, it's using that same mechanics as this whole, like, cute mechanic that I'm talking about. It says we can, you know, if we're being, here, Ariana.
Ryan,
yeah.
You're out of the show.
Yeah, we're gonna let Orion head back down to his home. I say this is a thing that we can, like, overcome through sort of cultural associations, though. So I kind of blew it by having the wrong side of my box out there. Penny didn't see that.
We now know what animal's coming up, or at least what pelt from.
Yep. But this is a fur that I use in my animal demos sometimes. And when I pull this out, usually the response that I get is a bunch of people going, ew, gross, I don't like it. And, you know, there's a reason for that, is because this is a skunk, and we as, you know, humans who have existed around skunks in northern Minnesota, like, recognize this as a thing that can, like, you know, spray us and be stinky. Like, that's the association we have there with this. But that's a cultural thing. Like, if you were to take this and show it to somebody who has no familiarity with a skunk, I mean, probably not this exact thing because it's kind of flattened out right now, but if you were to show a skunk to somebody who had never seen a skunk before, like, they're kind of cute, to be honest. Like, I've worked with skunks as an educator, and like once you get to know them, they're very cute, and they have a lot of those same features that we ascribe as being cute in a puppy, where it's like these short stubby legs, or they have their like big fluffy tails. I guess they're more like cats probably than puppies. They're kind of roundish in the head. They're a little pointy in the face, a little pointier than most cute things, but a little bit rounder head than things like a weasel or like our fisher has. Like, and have this weird little waddle. Like I said, the gait is something that is very associated with cuteness too. You can think of like a baby horse or a baby giraffe or something like that. Like, it comes out and you see it like trying to step up and walk, and that's something that we associate as being very cute. Is kind of the helplessness of it is something that we empathize and again infantilize and want to then protect. The cute instinct is also like a protection instinct, I guess, is what I'm trying to get out of that. Like I said, this guy exhibits a lot of the traits that you would see in a cute animal, but because we have this like really strong cultural association with skunks as like, ew, it's gonna spray me, gross, it escapes the cute moniker and goes into the ew, gross moniker. Kind of interesting. And over here, I have with me a couple different gentlemen, three fellas here. And I want to just talk a little bit about, I guess what we'll call sort of categorizing, sort of sorting animals into groups. And so you could broadly categorize, in this book we say, yeah, this is the ugly five. And so ugly is sort of a category that they're creating for themselves. And, we do this type of stuff too, where, we'll sort things into groups of cute versus not cute, that type of thing. And obviously there's a lot of categorizing that happens in biology too. And typically, ideally, in the modern day, we do this by relative genetic similarity. So it's using how closely related two things are genetically is how we decide how closely related they are. But that's only been an option for 20 or so years to do. And so we were sorting and categorizing things way before we had any like genetic means of doing so. And so for a lot of stuff, particularly like common names of things, end up being based on appearances. It ends up being based on what we call phenotypical similarity. So this is how similar things look to one another. And to a certain extent, that's like external stuff, but it's also like skeletal stuff. So like when you look at like dinosaur stuff, for example, basically all the dinosaur categorizing that we do based on how similar their bones look to one another. Like, it's a phenotypical similarity because we don't have any genome. There's no genes for us to use. They're gone. So we rely on, like I said, appearances basically. And what I have here is a great example of where that can kind of falter somewhat. So what I have here are three amphibians. I have a gray tree frog, and here is a American toad. And then in here we have our African clawed frog. So two animals that are called frogs, gray tree frog, African clawed frog, and one animal that gets referred to as a toad, our American toad. And, if we were going fully based on genetic similarity, spin this the other way so we don't have the sticker going there. But we have two different common names here. Like I said, two things that get called frogs, two things that get called, one thing that gets called a toad. And based on, that naming convention, we would assume that like these two things, the two frogs, are more closely related to each other than they are to the toad. Because, like I said, different common name. Unfortunately, that's not really true, because this is a great example of a situation where they were named based on, like I said, appearances and sort of behavioral stuff. So basically, the way that we decide if something is a frog or a toad or not is based on one, sort of how just like bumpy it is. If something is kind of bumpy and tends to spend more time on land, we typically will call it a toad. Whereas if it's something that has like smoother skin and tends to be a little bit wetter environments, whether that's in water or just like a generally like wetter climate, we tend to call them frogs. But if we were to actually like look at how similarly genetically related these three animals are, these two are more closely related to each other, the tree frog and the American toad, than either of them are to the African clawed frog. So even though these two both get called frogs, the African clawed frog and the gray tree frog, you said the toad is actually more closely related to the tree frog than the tree frog is to the clawed frog. So it's just an example where, like I said, our compulsion, our very human, our very like basic like internal like lizard brain need to like categorize things has kind of played a little bit of a trick up there on us, where we see appearances, we want to sort by appearances right away, even if, like I said, the actual biology of it doesn't necessarily back that up. And like I said, cute and not cute is another example where something like that might happen. Trying to think, is there another? I said the frog toad one is a great one because it pretty much is just based on like, is this ugly or is it cute? It tends to be kind of the sorting. Like I said, there's a certain element of the like how relatively dry land, like terrestrial it is, that plays into it to a certain degree as well. But it really is a matter of like how cute are you. The other kind of spin on this, kind of going back to domestication a little bit, when we decide what types of animals we're domesticating, we tend to favor ones that are kind of cute. Ones that are like visually appealing to us are ones that typically are going to be the ones that we choose to domesticate. And even once we start domesticating a thing, like I said, we tend to breed them to be more cute. What's kind of interesting about that is a lot of times we're not necessarily directly breeding for more cute, we're breeding for more docile, and a lot of times the cute is more of a byproduct of that. And so, like, for example, the like with dogs, for example, dogs versus wolves, initial domestication, initial selective breeding that's happening with those is, like I said, bred to be more docile. And you can imagine like the wolves that are ending up living with humans initially, like before they're dogs, are probably not the wolves that are real mean, like coming up and looking aggressive, baring their teeth, putting their ears back, looking real angry and mean. It's the ones that are a little more amicable, a little more friendly to begin with. And so once they start living in human communities, these just start breeding for that more and more and more docile, more willing to hang out and be hanging out with humans is a thing that you breed for. And it turns out when you're breeding for behavior, what tends to happen is the brain changes a little bit. Particularly in domestic versions of animals, you see a smaller brain than in their wild counterparts. And in particular, parts associated in the brain with like fear and aggression kind of get shrunk down. So like I think in like domestic dogs versus wolves, it's like almost 50% smaller in dogs. Like the part of the brain that controls sort of that fear impulse is a lot smaller in dogs than it is in wolves. And the result of that is like, certain parts of the skull change shape because the brain is now smaller. Shrinking, certain parts of the brain is going to have byproducts besides that one thing that you're breeding for. And so, like I said, that's where you start seeing things like the floppy ears are sometimes associated with that. There's unforeseen byproducts that kind of coincidentally lead to this like cuter appearance. And I'm not sure, like, I'm not sure if the physical traits that we associate with being cute also being associated with non-aggression. I'm not sure exactly where that plays into it, if it does at all. As far as being like a certain like biological compulsion to feel cute, if that's something that is associated with those like non-aggressive, those physical traits that are common for things that are less aggressive, could very well be true as well. But I'm not fully comfortable making that connection here and saying it's a thing for sure, but could be. Lee's behind the camera, and he seemed like he had something he wanted to say a little bit ago.
I did. Let's use one more animal for an example.
Okay.
And this was an attempt of a person to say, let's make this look cute because it's hanging on my wall. So if you don't mind, we're going to go to my left, and we're just going to go over here. And I think, yep, right, Ryan, you're going to end up right next to him.
Okay.
And we're just going to say, why did the taxidermist, I mean, if you were approaching that bear right now, that bear would not have that facial expression in any way, shape, or form.
Nope.
Right? You'd see some huge teeth.
Yeah, you'd see these lips coming up. Like I said, it's very much like when a dog gets upset. Lips come up, it shows teeth, signs of aggression. You'd probably see hair starting to stand up, making it look bigger and more imposing because it's big. Size is another thing that is very much associated with cuteness. We see small things and associate them as being cute more so than we see big things as being cute typically. So if a thing's trying to make itself look bigger, that's a sign that it's not trying to be cute right now. So another great example you'll see down on the exhibit floor of this is like Pogo, our bearded dragon. And he frequently will like have his beard puffed out, and that's him like trying to be big and scary. But there's a certain element of it where it kind of loops back around to sort of being cute because his efforts are so impotent as far as like trying to be scary that it almost loops around to being kind of infantilizing again because he's little and like clearly can't do anything about it.
You attach the word silly. You're really being silly. I can see why a person wouldn't want a scary looking bear hanging on the wall of their living room or their family room. Mm-hmm. And so they decided to depict this as a very docile looking, friendly creature. And boy, Ryan, if you were meeting this bear in the wild and you stood 2 feet away, neither one of you would have the facial expressions that are currently being depicted. So yeah, another example of, okay, let's go with cute.
Sound is another thing that we can associate with like cuteness versus not cuteness. And it kind of again ties back to the size thing. Splashing water on our book.
We're talking about the sprout right now. They're splashing water. He's saying, what about me? I truly am cute.
He is kind of cute.
Yeah, he is.
But bigger things tend to have deeper voices or make deeper sounds, pitched more deeply, and smaller things tend to make higher pitch noises, and so there's a certain association of high pitch noises as being cute. And again, I'm sure it ties back to like what types of noises do babies make? Not big, deep, chesty noises coming out of a baby. It's high pitched stuff. I mean, we can even see that. We have a great example of that here at the Science Center with O'Reilly, the red-tailed hawk. He has some damage to his vocal cords that sort of prevents him from making, that real typical like hawk call that you're used to hearing. So he just makes these little peeps. He almost sounds like a baby chick when he's making just like the noises that he makes. And people hear that and associate him as being much cuter than they probably would if he made like real hawk noises. People hear him and are like, ah. But he's a fearsome creature. Like if he wanted to, he could, take a chunk out of your arm like nothing if he really wanted to. But because he makes this like noise that we associate with baby birds rather than the noise that we associate with adult birds, like I said, he ends up being perceived as being much cuter. I mean, you can even see this with like people too. Like when you can very much like notice where it's like, if I've got a group of kids in front of me and they're being real rowdy and I gotta yell at them, my voice probably gets a little deeper when I'm doing that because I want to be a little bit more, intimidating, there. Whereas if I'm, hanging out one-on-one with a young kid and, we're having a real great experience, my voice probably goes up a few pitches because...
Yeah, and even more so when you go to the 3rd floor of our local hospital to go to the baby ward. Mm-hmm. Sure, your behaviors change.
Yep.
We have an owl. All right, for the people who are listening in or watch this show, we have lots of animals that we could do this entire cute conversation about. We have an owl you should come and see. She sits just inside our door, and she's about 5 inches in height. making her one of the cutest animals in the entire science center. And there are lots of people who say, "Oh, what a nice baby."
Mm-hmm.
This owl is anything but a baby, and you would not want to be reaching in and being friendly with this owl, because she's not all friendly one bit. But,
yeah, he's talking about Whoopi, the saw-whet owl, who, like you said, is right on your right when you come in the front door there. And he's right. A lot of people walk in and see her and assume that she's a baby. One, because she's very little, but also very round. Again, like it's that roundness that comes into it. The big round eyes, the little squirt round body. Like it displays a lot of, again, very sort of infantile traits, because that's just kind of how owls are shaped. And you're right. A lot of people do come in and think she's a very cute animal, but you know, she seems a lot less cute when I'm in there feeding her and she's like taking a bloody dead mouse out of my hand. Like she's a lot less cute in that context. But you're right, if you're like just looking at her, just eyeballing her without knowing more about her, yeah, she's very cute. Like I said, it's kind of the opposite thing that the skunk has. She's cute because we don't know anything about her, whereas the skunk is not cute because we know about it. Anyway. Let's draw a little mustache on it. There we go. Now it can be me.
If you put a smiley face on there, you've already got some of the audience members smiling. So, yep.
Yep. So that was part of the trap that I laid, though, is because our Fisher has kind of a frowny little mouth there.
Yeah, there it is.
Or here's a fun one. We can give that frowny little mouth, and we register that as a person. But what if we do this? Now all of a sudden we're thinking like, yeah, it's like a cat or something when you put that little
rabbit.
Yeah, or bunny.
Or Ryan coming.
Go that far, and all of a sudden, like it's super not a person anymore for drawing one more line on it. It's fun. It's fun how simplified we can make a thing. There's, I'm sure, a whole school of design. I mean, that's what minimalism is about, I guess, in design, is breaking a thing down to the as basic a components as you can get and see if you can still make it recognizable. So, yeah, difference between a human and a cat is a triangle and a line. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. The Headwater Science Center is open 9:30 to 5, 6 days a week. So if you come in Monday through Saturday, we are open 9:30 to 5. If you're coming in on Sunday, we are open from 1 to 5. If you happen to swing by at 3:30, we are oftentimes doing these shows. We usually do 3-ish of them a week. So Wednesday and Friday, we're pretty much always doing them, and there's usually one other show sometime between Saturday and Wednesday. It kind of floats around depending on when Carl gets time to do it. So yeah, if you happen to swing by at 3:30 and happen to see us doing one of these shows, absolutely feel free to come up and watch and maybe even participate. We, oftentimes have guests that are swooping in and helping us out with the thing, and we're always happy to have them. But anyways, like I said, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you, probably Carl seeing you when